I'm the manager of the Von Huene Workshop and the Early Music Shop of New England. We make some of the finest recorders in the world. The shop was founded in 1960 by Friedrich von Huene, who wanted to make instruments good enough to perform the original music of the 18th century. The shop is now run by his son, Patrick von Huene, who is our principal maker, who's been making recorders for nearly 40 years now.
This is where a lot of recorders start, with the boxwood. Grows in southern France, Spain, Iraq, Iran, Turkey, England. They have huge trees that take quite a long time to get big enough to make a recorder. You'll see some of it drying. This is what we make blocks out of. It's called aromatic cedar, but the genus is Juniperus. It's Juniperus virginiana. Anyone in here? Oh, look at that. That's curly maple. That probably won't be used for a recorder, but we have quite a lot of it. A lot of wood, and a lot of it's been here for decades. This is plum. This is fake boxwood. One of the, I think this is Castello boxwood. And that's the real thing. Like I say, it's been drying for decades, so it should be pretty stable. When Friedrich was alive, anyone near him who was cutting down a tree, he would go and ask for the wood. So he has a lot of wood that he got that way. Some of it is not really for making instruments. This is locust, black locust. You wouldn't make recorders out of black locust, but nonetheless, we have quite a lot of it. Cherry, beautiful stuff. Here's something I don't have a clue what it is, but it's huge. Over here we have huge logs of granadilla. There's lots of Dalbergia that we have, which is on CITES treaty now, but we've had it for quite a long time. So it was well before CITES. Olive wood, which smells amazing when you work it. Pink ivory, which is really a pretty heavy, dense wood. It's quite beautiful. And more boxwood, more boxwood. Here's what happens to boxwood. See, the hole is already drilled for the bore, but the wood wasn't really aged enough. And what happened is it warped. And now, because it's so warped, there's nothing that can be used for it. And sometimes they warp a little bit. That's a little bit of warpage, but we still have a lot of allowance. So that most of these are probably still good. I think Patrick and I will be long gone before all this wood gets used up. Grenadilla is beautiful stuff. It's what they make clarinets and oboes out of. It's really wonderful wood. Smells good too. All of these are parabolic reamers. They have a slight parabolic curve, and they're in graduated sizes, each a quarter of a millimeter larger. And with that, you can copy the shape of any bore of any historical instrument. But when we're ready to go in production, we make, for every part of the recorder, we make a reamer. And this is a final reamer, and the reamer is shaped like the bore. It's hard to tell that it's not absolutely cylindrical. It's conical. Conicity comes to a little end here, and it goes this way, and then it'll go again. What every instrument has, this is for the Rippert altos, every instrument has lots of things that go into the production of it. These are mandrels to hold the thing when you're doing something. All these little bits and pieces that we all make here. They're all made here. You can't go to Sears and get this stuff. Socket reamer. Socket reamer. This is not a final reamer. Somewhere along the stage. Foot reamer, not the final foot reamer. And every single instrument that we make has all these things. This is a huge lathe with a huge extended bed. See that this is a normal sized bed. We've added another one. With this, we can do work that's pretty long. And this is when Friedrich was making huge basses, great basses and contrabasses. Now we pretty much use this as a gun drill. And that's what starts the bore. We drill a hole down the length of a piece of wood. It's held here. And this guy here turns, and we have a motor that advances. This guy here, we even have an air hose that blows air through here to remove the bits. But it doesn't look like a drill, but it makes a really nice cut. It's called a gun drill, and it's really sharp. These are machines we use to pre-shape the blocks. When it comes off of these, it doesn't actually fit. We do the final fitting by hand, just like we do everything. Every final thing is done by hand. A Bridgeport milling machine, the standard of the previous century, and it's still a great tool. This saves an awful lot of time. What we do is make a template that's ultimately the shape of the foot. So the foot's reamed inside and out, the socket's reamed, and it's already pre-done to make it a little easier. Turn this guy on and just follow the template. It's all set up. Wood is going to go flying off. And again, it's rough, but that'll get sanded and it'll look pretty nice. Because we're not actually cutting, we're scraping, we're going to have to sand these. They get sanded and they look real good. More things. This is part of what we do the broaching of the windway. It's done with a machine that Patrick's twin brother Andreas designed. When I say machine, I mean machines. Each one of these is specific to an instrument. This is a dinner alto broaching machine. You put the alto in here, you snug that up right good. And if it were a dinner, it would fit nicely in there. And then this goes back and forth, and you have a little knob here that brings it up slowly, and it's patterned because there's a template down here at the bottom that's shaped like the top of the windway, and the templates on the sides are shaped like the sides of the windway. Nifty little machine. And that does a really good job. That's one of the few things that we don't really have to touch up much by hand. This machine cuts the ramp, but again, it just does a down and dirty, crappy job. We do the rest with knives. So when it comes off of that, the ramp machine, it looks kind of like that, raggedy. And then we start with knives. This is not even close to being done. That's a little closer. Here's another rough. And upstairs you'll see the final. It's really remarkable what Patrick does. I've done carving windways. I've done quite a lot of them. And when I'm done carving a windway, I take it to Patrick and he goes, hey, that's pretty good. I'll clean it up.
I'm carving a Stainsby alto head joint here and a beautifully flamed boxwood, a special order, and taking our time to just carve it nicely out of real European boxwood, which is what we use. We take our time. It takes about an hour to carve a window properly. We've done it a few times.
So do you have multiple different knives you use for this?
Yeah, this is a short one. Some are good for scraping, part of the smoothing process. It depends on the hone of the blade and the angle of the blade surface. And the beginning process to make it smooth, very smooth. And then we finish with different files. Sometimes the file surface is not very rough by file standards, but it's to even out the labium, the edge, which becomes a knife edge in the end. And we go from, let's say, 400 paper to 2000 paper. It's remnants of 2000 written there, but it's a mirror finish when we're done. As I mentioned earlier, it really makes a difference in how the instrument sounds and the clarity of sound. You know, very clean, clear airflow aerodynamically. All these things matter. And then this knife I use to cut the edge of the labium to the right distance from the block line, but the block line is not finished yet, so I can't do that yet. This is the block line, this shoulder here. In other words, the block on the inside corresponds with this shoulder, and on the inside there's actually a shoulder that stops the block from going in further. You can force it, but then you take a chance in splitting your instrument, which of course you don't want to do. At this point, 39 years of doing it, you hopefully get pretty good at it. But it's critical. We try to keep our turning tolerances to 1/10 of a millimeter, 4/1000 of an inch. The wood will expand and contract that amount winter to summer. And for these things, we need to really be almost spot on. Sometimes it gets away from you a little bit, but 1/10 or no more, plus or minus. It's really all about maintaining consistency, right? That's how you can maintain, hopefully, quality. Right? Bearing in mind we're doing baroque instruments, or not direct copies, but instruments that were stimulated by the original instruments, and we're trying to emulate those to a point with some modifications. But if you want to make a modern recorder or something doing different things, then it's a completely different design. A lot of makers try to modernize Baroque instruments with sometimes okay results, usually not. But for modernizing a recorder, in other words, a bigger bore or to extend the range, you need a different bore, completely different design. But we're focusing on Baroque instruments primarily. We have done other modern things.
So most of these designs were created by your father?
Well, some of the designs are based on original instruments. My dad did do his own designs, which were very successful, put us all through college. Also redesigning instruments from originals to scale them for 440, for instance, the Moeck Rottenburgh instrument. Some Mollenhauer instruments, great bass, contrabasses, a lot of design work. Some design work also for some Japanese firms who did instruments in plastic. But primarily those were based on original Baroque designs, and they were scaled for modern pitch, 440, 442. And there are always some subtle changes done just so that they have the playability that we expect today. Let's say better intonation, better fingerings, just make it easier to play. And then longevity, in other words, certain sealants that you use in the bore or whatever, just to make them last longer. And then sometimes better quality wood, glues, all kinds of things that we use in the modern age, which are superior than what they had, 300-400 years ago. And some people want an instrument like an exact copy of original. We can do that to a point, but very few people want instruments that with single holes, original fingering. They want to experience the flavor, so to speak, or the nuances of an original instrument at single holes with original fingering. It's a little more challenging to play. You don't have the same flexibility, but that's what they want. Fine. But for the general use in the public and today, we do double holes and scale instruments to either 415 or 440. We will do some 392 or 410 upon request, or anything we'll consider. But for the general population, they want things consistent. We're playing at 415 or 440 or 442.
So I'm making sure that the drill bit, because we have a finished flute center here and an unfinished flute center that I'm about to drill the holes in. And I'm using this finished one to set up the unfinished one. And I want to make sure that the first hole, that the first drill bit will go exactly where that first hole is. And then after I drill the first hole, I can then use that to set up the distance, the relative distances. So I think it's okay. First, we're going to double check that this drill bit is the right size. And it is. It goes in snugly, but it's not too large. There we go. So there's a pencil line right here where I'm going to try to match up with this. And the pencil line is on the quarter grain. So if I turn the center, you'll see that the grain here is kind of wide. And it's the same on the other side. The holes are typically drilled between those two axes.
Good pencil line?
Yeah.
Oops, sorry. And And the speed right is a little on the slow side, or you want it slow? Let me see. Just start real slow, okay? There's a tear. Let me check this. Hold that. He's a lefty. Okay, dude. Cool.
And that's that. So here we have the first hole. And on this one, it's been undercut. So we have the original diameter, but then it sort of flares out in the bottom. This is just, right now, it's a straight hole. But on to the next one. We have millimeters and we have imperial. And we also have ones that are just labeled with like numbers and letters, so like number 1 or A. So I have all 3 of those represented here. So I am. The last hole was a 17/64, and this is a K. And that goes in.
Lovely.
Cool.
I'm bushing with elk horn, and I'm just puffing up the center. Nice and shiny.
And oiled, they look like that. Just really beautiful. And then it goes back to Patrick, and it comes back to me, and then it goes back, then it comes back to me. And what we're looking for is just an instrument that works well in all the registers, has kind of a nice sound, and gets all the notes.
Once the instrument is finished, before shipping to the customer, it is marked using a stamp based on the original mark of the maker for the relative instrument, as well as the Von Huene stamp and a serial number.
Superb instrument, but it's been around since the early 60s. And it's being sold to a gentleman in California, and we're repairing some cracks and doing some maintenance. crack here that we flew today. There was a former crack from years ago on the other side that's held luckily, but this is a new one. And this is mahogany, and you can't even get this stuff anymore.
Sometimes we need a really big lathe to work on things. We're gonna we put corks on here. We grind them with a tool post grinder. And this had a crack in it that's being glued, and then we're gonna have to cork that and grind them and sand them as well.
We sell also recorders by other makers. Most of the suppliers are in Germany or Switzerland. Friedrich von Huene designed the Moeck Rottenburgh recorder, which is one of the most popular models sold in the world today. He also designed a plastic recorder for Zen-On in Japan, which has recently been redesigned and become very popular again. We sell instruments from Yamaha, which makes some terrific plastic recorders, as well as some toys. We also sell sheet music for early instruments, mostly recorder, but also viola da gamba, early flutes, chamber music from the 18th century, and a wide variety of used instruments, which you can't see, but they're sort of all around me, for people who are looking to pass along a recorder to someone that they're no longer playing.